Good morning. Welcome to the March 23rd, 2020 meeting of the Rutherford County Regional Planning Commission. If you will stand with us, please. Commissioner Pettis Reed will lead us in our prayer and our pledge. Pettis.
Will you join me in prayer? Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we come before you on this day in this meeting. And Father, I guess many of us do come before you this day with possibly heavy hearts, with concern. And across this country, we all have those concerns and the things that are going on. That's something that we have never experienced before. Father, my thoughts go back to your holy word and go back where we read in 1 Kings, where even King Solomon had questions. And he makes the statement in those words that when he was about to become king, he says, I'm nothing but a little child, and I know not whether to go out or come in. Father, that may be many of us as we face things that we haven't seen before. When we face these things within our county government, when we face these things within our state, and when we face these things within our country, things we don't know whether to go out or come in. Father, we ask that you be with our leadership, that you give us direction, that you give us wisdom, that only you can do so. Father, in this time, you give us the ability to pray, because we know things are within your control and your direction. Father, we ask that you be with those who administer to those who are ill. We ask that you be with those caregivers. And Father, we know that our ability is based upon you. Father, we are so blessed within this country. And as we face these difficult times, may we not forget those blessings that we have and that we have experienced. And so many times the difficulties that we are involved in life, it causes our minds to go back to those things that we are blessed with. Father, we ask that you be with us, that you guide us, that you direct us, and Father, may we continue to seek after you. Be with us this day. Bless our country, bless our county, and bless the state of Tennessee. Watch over and protect us. We offer this prayer in your Son's holy name. Amen.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Call the roll, please, Gail.
Charlotte P. Chip Pinion. Craig Lynch. David Jones. Jim Averwater. Lee Bogle. Marvin Whitworth. Mike Cush. Pettis Reed. Rhonda Allen. Jeff Phillips.
Present.
We have quorum.
Thank you, Gail. This time we need to approve the minutes for our January 27th meeting. I'll call on our Vice Chair, Pettis Reed.
Mr. Chairman, I have those minutes. I have a copy here on my desk if anyone would like to see those. I have gone through those minutes. I have found nothing wrong. I move that they be approved.
We have a motion and a second to approve our January 27th meeting minutes. All those in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. We have no items that have been withdrawn
Mr. Chairman,
deferred.
actually, we do. I apologize. I didn't have a chance to tell you before the meeting. But under site plan approval, item 2 under site plans, Burnt Knob self-storage, that has been removed from the agenda. Probably be coming next month.
6C2,
Yes,
Burnt Knob self-storage.
Correct.
Has been removed.
I didn't get with you before. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Before we get into our new business, let me just say that it's odd to see us separated the way we are, but it's a necessary evil for what our country's going through. You in the audience, we're supposed to be restricting to 10 people, and I see that you've fanned out a little bit, and I commend you for doing that. As we get to the item, the agenda item that you are here for, after that item has been heard, please leave. Any questions or comments before we get into today's agenda? Okay, item 6A. These are items submitted for preliminary plan approval. 6A1, 20-1003, Sycamore Grove subdivision, 234 lots on 105.8 acres, zone PUD, located along Old Nashville Highway and Burleson Lane. Econopass Land Group is the applicant. Doug.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and good morning, Commissioners. As you recall, the planned development zoning for this property was approved by the Board of Commissioners back in January of this year. The application was for a maximum of 250 residential lots. The plan that you have before you right now shows a total of 234, but I believe 229 of those being residential. Since that only difference that they're proposing is just smaller, or I'm sorry, less lots, not smaller, but less lots, this isn't a deviation, in my opinion, that would have to go back to the Planning Commission. The road networks are the same, access, everything else that they were requesting in their pattern book, nothing is unchanged. And as we were going through the zoning process, the applicant was aware that 250 was the outside maximum they could ever hope to attain. They didn't think they would probably get that, but there are conversations still ongoing with the applicant and CUD as far as the exact number of lots that they will have. But as of right now, it looks like right around 230, 229 is what they're looking at. Most of the comments that we have been addressed. Now, I will say that staff does still have some question about some of the drainage in this subdivision, how some of that step soils is going to drain. Now, at this point, that's not a question that this particular step needs to answer. Those are what we'll see at that point will be the construction drawings for the sections themselves that will be coming in, the individual sections. And they'll have to demonstrate to us and to Mike that the drainage in those areas will work, that this subdivision will drain properly, based on our regulations. As you recall, this was a discussion, there was quite a bit of discussion on this regarding the drainage of the subdivision and different things. But like I said, for the most part, our comments have been addressed as far as the preliminary plan goes, but this is really just stop one on the train of approval, if you will, now that the zoning has been approved. So there's several more steps left in the process. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions or if Mike has any additional comments beyond what I've said.
Any questions or comments? Since this is preliminary plan, you're okay with moving it forward?
Well, as far, like I said, for this step, this will start getting them into the more detailed drainage calculations and drainage issues. That's, to answer your question, yes, I think we're okay moving it forward, but understanding that there's a lot more that they'll have to demonstrate before they'll get any final plat approvals or permits for construction or anything like that.
I'll make a motion to approve, subject to everything satisfies Doug, and I don't need to say any specific things, do it, just about the drainage. It just satisfies you and Mike.
Right. They will not start construction until we adequately review construction plans. We have yet to see any construction plans, so as far as we know, they're still in the works, and we will not allow any construction to begin until they satisfy all county regulations and make sure that they don't impact any of the neighbors.
I'll make the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve item 20-1003, Sycamore Grove subdivision. We'll get another shot at this, correct?
Yes, sir. Staff will review the construction drawings, and of course, the final plats will come back to the Planning Commission for your review and approval.
That takes care of all of your concerns. Craig? There. Other questions? All those in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye. Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. 6A2, item number 201004, Smotherman Estates, 283 lots on 272.3 acres, zoned RL, located along Midland and Jones Road. Mike Hollinghead is the applicant. Doug?
Yes, sir. Thank you. This plan has actually gone through several iterations that we've reviewed. Now, you haven't had it come before you yet. This is the first time. I think it was on an agenda last year, but it never did quite make it to the meeting. This most recent plan that you're seeing identifies about 375 residential lots, 383 total, but 375 residential. Access to this property is being shown from Jones Road with back access point connecting to Lotto Lane, which is in the Midland Acres subdivision. The property is zoned RL, residential low density, but the zoning ordinance does allow for RL zoned property to apply the RM bulk requirements if it's served by a step system or sanitary sewer, but in this case it's the step, and has adequate fire protection. They have provided letters to us from Consolidated saying that the fire demands for the subdivision should be able to be met. So both factors have been satisfied in the subdivision, which allows them to go to the RM bulk requirements. We do have several concerns with this plan. Most of those have been addressed. Just looking at our list of things that we had left, there's still some question about the showing the wetlands and everything on the sheets that were identified. That was really one of the reasons why it was before the Planning Commission about a year or so ago, but then didn't, because we had them go back and do some wetland determinations, which they have completed. So beyond that issue and a couple of just what I would call housekeeping issues, this is similar to what the plan we just looked at as far as, again, this is just preliminary plan. You know, they'll have to come out with construction drawings that will be reviewed by staff and then final plats and all that. This is just, again, step one in the process. So this did not require a rezoning, just if that question does come up, since this was already zoned for residential purposes. This is abiding by the regulations that are already in place. So with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. And again, Mike, if you've got comments, feel free to chime in.
Same situation. We have yet to see construction plans, but we won't allow construction to commence until we are satisfied that they meet all the county regulations.
Doug, I've got a question. Are all ingress, egress going to go to Jones Road?
No.
They'll have two access points onto Jones, but then they have one on the backside where Lotto Lane, Michael, I'm sure that, yeah, if you look on the map there. Yeah, now that one to Lotto Lane, that's a later section. That's not one of the first ones, but everything will start coming off of Jones Road to begin with.
I think they've got that shown as section 3,
like, yeah.
The third section. They will connect to Lotto Lane to have a third ingress egress point, and they are providing stubs to all the large tracks around it to allow additional connections.
It's concerned me that if normal people move in here, that's nearly 700 cars coming out of there every day.
And upon full build out, you're right, yes.
When that gets full, there'll be 700 to 1,000 cars coming out of there every day. And Jones Road, Midland Road, Cairo Road, going to have a hard time handling all that.
Each set of construction plans will have they'll have a traffic study done as well, and we'll evaluate the surrounding roads as well. So they still have a long way to go.
Mike, that creek's a pretty good creek.
Yes, sir, and that's part of the reason they've changed their design. They were calling for a connection out to Midland Road, and they found out they were going to have to build a substantial box culvert and cross some wetlands, so they changed their tune and decided to reconfigure.
I've never been down there, and when it's flooding, so I'm not a person of that community that goes and looks and sees where it goes to, but that really needs to be looked at close.
Oh, yes, sir.
It's
right.
That's a man of a creek. It is.
That's part of the Stones River, and there's some associated flood zones with that. So that's part of the vetting process of the construction plan review. So we'll look at all factors that we see that need to meet the county regulations. But yes, you have a convergence of 3 pretty good sized streams come together on the property and flow to the north, and then we pick up another stream a little bit farther north. So you've got a significant amount of drainage flowing through here. And these 2 blue highlighted areas are the areas that will be developed. You'll have 2 connections, one here that'll match up with Beverly Court, and then one a little bit farther to the east. And then we've got some stubs out to the larger tracks. And if my map will work, one connection to Lotto Lane here to the south in Section 3 to help disperse the traffic.
Questions?
Mr. Chairman, just as Commissioner Whitworth has said there, I was in that direction Saturday, and if this does come out to Midland Road, that is quite a bit of traffic on that road. That road is already very heavy. And then when you're going into Jones Road only empties into Midland Road, as well as some of those back roads back there. Jones Road is not that large of a road itself. So that will have to be looked at very in detail, that traffic that will come from that subdivision. And the water that's involved in that property too. So as Mr. Demasi said there, it's got a long way to go.
Is there a motion in there, Pettis?
I'll make a motion to approve, subject to staff comments.
We have a motion and a second to approve item number 201004 for Sutherman Estates. Other questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. From a preliminary perspective, we've just approved 617 additional lots in the county. We've gone years and years in the past when we didn't come close to approving 617 lots, and we've just done that in 30 minutes. Item 6B, these are items submitted for final plat approval. 6B1, the item number is 20-2007, re-subdivision of Lot 1 of Clarence A. Thomas, one lot subdivision. One lot of 1.16 acres, zoned RM, located along Gum-Puckett Road. Clarence Thompson is the applicant. This is a waiver to create a lot of less than 5 acres on a private easement and a possible fire hydrant waiver. Doug?
Yes, sir. Thank you. This item was actually on the Planning Commission's agenda last month, but we were actually still waiting word on the fire hydrant request from Consolidated. As it turns out, a fire hydrant can be supported in this area, so the fire hydrant waiver will not be necessary. However, I will say that the other waiver would still be required. I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong one here. This plat actually, the Planning Commission approved a waiver request for this property at their August 26, 2019 meeting in regard to the lot being on less than on private easement being less than 5 acres in size. So what they're proposing today is consistent with what was approved by the Planning Commission last year. However, we cannot approve any kind of a plat administratively, so it has a waiver, so that's why it's coming before you today. Again, the fire hydrant request has been approved as far as putting the hydrant there, so that's a waiver they won't need. So really, the plat's in good order. I was talking with the applicant's representative just before the meeting, and they got a couple little tweaks they have to make, but nothing that would hold up the plat approval. So with that, we believe it's in good order. We'd recommend approval.
Strike out the fire hydrant waiver, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
If I remember this correctly, and that this was for family,
That's my understanding, yes, sir. Yeah. Miss Ma'am, excuse me. I was looking at the, with the surveyor, sorry.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 20-2007. This is a re-subdivision of Lot 1, Clarence A. Thompson. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. 6B2, item 20-2022, Mesa subdivision, section 4, one lot on 2.4 acres zoned RM located along Barfield Crescent Road. John A. Thompson is the applicant. Includes waivers to create a lot of less than 5 acres along a private easement measuring 25 feet in width. Doug?
Yes, sir, thank you. As you stated, the applicant is proposing to divide the subject property to create an additional lot. This parcel is actually identified on the county's GIS, but staff has not been able to determine how exactly that did come about. Regardless, this plat will rectify any issues of the creation of the lot should it be approved. The lot immediately to the west of this property was approved in 1999 for a waiver to the access easement width and minimum lot size for lots off of private easements, which is the waivers that this application is asking for as well. That lot was platted back in September of 2005, and there was an addition of the fire hydrant waiver at that time for that lot. The access easement waivers were for a 3-lot subdivision, but staff can find no record of any other property subdivisions that were ever based off of that waiver request. Even though this is a 1-lot subdivision, similar actually to most of these on here with the exception of the very last final plat we'll be looking at, these are all 1 or 2-lot subdivisions today. Generally, we can handle those administratively, but like the last one, if it has a waiver request or requests as this one does, we cannot handle those administratively. Those have to come before the Planning Commission. I will say that the applicant's design engineer has made an application to CUD for a fire hydrant determination, which did come back approved as well. So a fire hydrant waiver would not be necessary for this particular lot. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have. As far as the plat's concerned, they've addressed most of the comments that we have. You know, the waivers are pretty much the main outstanding issue at this
Recommendation?
point. We recommend approval. It's consistent with what was approved in the past. So,
I'll also make that motion.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 20-2022, Mesa subdivision, section 4. Other questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye. Is there any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. 6B3, item 20-2023, Linda Harrell subdivision, 1 lot on 1.85 acres, zoned RM, located along Cranor Road. Willie McMahon is the applicant. Waiver for the creation of an unbuildable lot. Doug?
Yes, sir, thank you. The applicant would like to transfer the subject property to a family member. This proposed lot was actually created when Craner Road was extended through the property years back. It was part of a larger tract. So it's been identified as the same tax map and parcel as the parent tract, but it's just sat there. So now they're wanting to actually do a transfer, and to do that, it has to have its own unique ID as far as a tax map and parcel, so it has to be platted. We run into these situations every so often when a road splits a piece of property like this. No soils work have been done on this property to this point. The applicant understands that before any permits would be issued, they would have to do an amendment plat showing any soils work and things that they have done that would show that this is an actual buildable parcel. So at this point, it's really just for transferring the property. So this plat, if it's approved, will accomplish that. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. The plat itself is in good order, with the exception of the waiver.
Nothing changes other than the ownership.
Correct.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 20-2023, Linda Harold subdivision. Other questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Is there any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. 6B4, item 20-2024, Premier Fence Company, 2 lots on 4.76 acres, Zone CS, located along Sulphur Springs Road. Walter and Christian Donnell are the applicants. Donnell are the applicants. Waiver for an off-site soils easement. Doug.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The western portion of this property was granted a conditional use permit for a cabinet making shop back in 2002. When we did the comprehensive rezoning in the county back in 2013, we zoned the entire property commercial services. The applicant would like to split the property with the existing building on Lot 2 and then having a proposed business on Lot 1, and that will actually see a site plan for that Lot 1 property a little later in the agenda. Lot 1 will need to rely on soils from Lot 2, so the applicant is requesting a waiver to the off-site soil provisions in our subdivision regulations. Staff's also identified some other deficiencies with the plat, but for the most part, those have been addressed. There may be some tweaks here and there, especially just with consistency with the site plan, but other than that, unless Mike has any additional comments, we're okay with this being approved as long as they work out those other issues prior to recording. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions, or Mike, if you've got
Right.
comments.
This will go along with the site plan. There might be some tweaking that goes on that needs to be reflected on the final plat. They have a off-site detention pond area, and they, like Doug said, they're got some other issues that we need to address. But all in all, it's in good.
The owner owns both properties. Yes, no? He's going to have the septic line on somebody else's property, or is that going to be on his?
Well, regardless, I'm not sure if he actually owns, right now he'd own the whole property just because of the fact that it's still one tract of land. The reason for the plat, of course, is to subdivide into 2 tracts, less than 5 acres, but that's why all the different easements are there. So in the future, if ownership does change, there's always a record that, yes, they're relying on this. A new owner couldn't come in and say, well, I'm not going to let you use that. They're under, they know that there's easements there for some of that.
Now, Manley, did they have enough soil on Lot 1 for Premier Fence, or were they going to need to share some with that? Okay. They do have a small septic soil area on Lot 1, but a much larger one on Lot 2. The existing building on Lot 1 does utilize the soil for there, but only a small area because it's just like a bathroom or something in there.
Mr. Chairman, I have a procedural question. So, Doug, let me make sure I understand. The whole property is zoned commercial services.
That's correct.
But the owner wants to split the property and sell off part of the property.
Yes.
So somebody comes in and then wants to build another building and start another commercial business. Would he have to have a public hearing on that, or the fact that it's already
No,
zoned?
it's already zoned properly, so yeah, there's no reason for another public hearing or anything.
Right.
Staff's recommendation.
We recommend approval moving forward, pending our comments, of course, like always.
I move to, for approval upon all staff comments.
Thank you, Charlotte. We have a motion and a second to approve item 20-2024 for Premier Fence Company. Other questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Is there opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. 6B5, item number 20-2025, Rooker Estates subdivision, 3 lots on 5.32 acres, zoned RM, located along Rooker Lane. Alcorn Properties is the applicant. Doug?
Yes, sir. Thank you. This is actually the one of the 5 final plats we looked at that would have to come to the Planning Commission, even though there's no waivers associated with it. They are proposing to subdivide this property into 3 lots, as you stated. There were issues that we had with this plat. Those issues have been addressed. We did ask them to place some asterisks on the lot regarding minimum pad and floor elevations, which they have done. As well as putting in, they're going to have, they're not sharing a driveway, they'll be individual drives. So with that, the plat appears to be in good order. As you can see on the plat, there is an existing fire hydrant right in front of, looks like Lot 1. So no waivers necessary with this plat. We recommend approval.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 20-2025, Rooker Estates subdivision. Other questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Is there any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Item 6C, these are items submitted for site plan approval. 6C1, the item number is 19-3047, Superior Property Solutions, construction of approximately 9,000 square feet of construction, sales, and service space on 6.56 acres, zoned CS, located along Old Nashville Highway. Superior Constructors are the applicant. Doug?
Yes, sir. Thank you. This property was rezoned by the Board of Commissioners back in April of 2019. The applicant is proposing to move his existing business to this property. His existing business, as you recall, was located a little further down toward Murfreesboro on West College Street. Same road, really, just a little further down the road. The original site plan that we looked at showed a large gravel storage area. That has been removed from the plan. There were some concerns about the drainage on the property. I know our engineering staff has been working with the applicant on those issues. I'll let Mike address those in more detail. Most of the concerns have been addressed as far as from a planning and buffering standpoint. There is quite a bit of existing buffer material out there that the applicant's proposing to use, which we allow for. There is going to have to be a little bit of area with just some supplemental plantings, if you will. That's not anything that will hold up approval or anything. That's something we can work through as we get ready for the permitting process. But again, as you can see, there's quite a bit of plantings out there. So the landscape plan just needs to kind of show a little bit more of that on there. And I think from staff standpoint, I think we'll be in good shape. That was one of the concerns during the Planning Commission's public hearing, as I remember, that a lot of buffer area be left around where the existing residences, especially to the south. So with that, again, I'll turn it over to Mike for any drainage concerns. But from our standpoint, most of our comments have been addressed.
Thank you, Doug. Questions or comments? Thank you, Jim. We have a motion and a second to approve item 19-3047, Superior Property Solutions. Other questions? All those in favor, then say aye. Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Item 6C2 has been withdrawn. Item 6C3, 20-3010, Premier Fence Company, construction of 3,200 square foot construction sales and service building on 2.35 acres zone CS located along Sulphur Springs Road. Walter and Kristen Donnell are the applicants. Doug.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This is the site plan that we were referring to earlier when we were reviewing the plat along Sulphur Springs Road. The applicant is proposing to construct a fence business on Lot 1 of this property, which is what you have before you. As stated earlier, they are going to have to rely on additional septic on Lot 2, which was what showed on the approved plat. We did have several comments regarding this particular site plan. Most of the comments we have been addressed. There are still a few outstanding. One of them has to do with the buffering on the property. Anytime you have a commercial piece of property adjacent to residential, you have to have a type 2 buffer. They have quite a bit of existing plantings that they've identified on the eastern property line. On the back property line, that'd be the northern property line, they're not showing enough space there for a buffer. There's going to have to be a little more work done on that. There is no buffering required to the west, just because that property is also zoned commercial services, so they won't have to do anything on that side of the property. But just looking at that, that was some of the primary concerns that we had. I know that there are some drainage concerns with this one. Mike, I'll turn it over to you to take a look at it. Yeah.
Just some tweaking that we need to do, and let me show you on. They're showing a proposed detention pond in an easement that was reflected on the associated final plat to divide this property, and it will benefit both lots. But however, as you can see, I have my suspicion that for this existing building, let me zoom out a little bit. This is their septic system right here, and they're proposing to dig a little bit of a pond right here. So we need to know where that service line, if it goes right through that pond area, we might need to have them tweak either the service line or the pond, and that will change the easement associated with the detention pond on the final plat. So just looking at it, you know, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, and I think that's where the sewer service line might be. So if they're digging in this area, it might impact their sewer service line for that building. Let me go back to, and like I said, just some minor stuff, but these are things that keep me up at night. They are showing some cutting around the existing septic system, the existing, or this proposed septic system here. So typically you don't want to cut anywhere around that. So we'll have to have them adjust that 540 contour. We'd like to see more of the parking area directed toward the pond, to allow it to gather. I think some minor changes with that, directing the water towards this existing culvert. There's an existing culvert underneath this driveway, and they're showing a little bit of a swale being dug here. But if we can get the water to flow in the direction to that pond and then adjust the pond, it should be in good order. So there's some minor tweaking to go, but all in all, it's a pretty good plan.
When they establish where the field lines are.
Yes, I would have them, see, this is the soil area here, and I assume that the existing building here has a straight line to the the field line here, but I don't know that for certain. It could go around underneath the driveway. Just we need to get them to locate that tight line to the field line and make sure they're not cutting through it when they start digging.
When they mark those, do you physically go out there and look at it?
They'll probably have to go out and probe them.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And then I'll have them reflect that on the plan. So that's not a big deal. We can, looking at the topography, this could be adjusted, the pond, without digging down so deep and maybe relocating it a little bit, but that would in turn change the recorded detention pond easement on the plat. So those are two things that kind of tied together. But it's doable. You know, Doug said there's some tweaking needs to be done with the landscaping plan. I'd like them to look at the, they've got a solid waste enclosure, trash enclosure, and it's close to an existing overhead power line here. I might get them to look for a new spot, maybe in this gravel area somewhere here, or at another location. You know, if you've got one of those garbage trucks, you don't want it swinging up and down underneath that power line. But all in all, it's doable. No, sir. I think these are minor changes that we can work out before we begin construction.
And I'll make a motion to accept with staff comments.
I have a motion and a second to approve item 20-3010 for Premier Fence Company. Other questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Aye. Opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. One observation, Doug and Mike, that what you said was minor, but there was a lot of it.
Yes, sir. Right.
And
well,
it kind of bothers me as a planning commissioner that we're seeing stuff for a final plat approval that has a lot of stuff, even though it might be minor. Is that something that it makes me, and I see a couple of other folks, a little uncomfortable that a final plat is coming to us with still a lot of stuff to be done?
Well, that one was associated with the site plan. So we've got to get the site plan situated, and then the final plat has to reflect that, with especially that offsite easement. So
Okay.
if there wasn't an offsite easement, the final plat would have sailed on through without it. It's the site plan that needs some more work than the final.
Okay.
And I will say that, I mean, we've got representatives from some of the engineering firms still present in the audience. I mean, and they're aware of the concerns because we share them as well, and we relay the concerns that you have to them and tell them, you know, if there's going to be a lot of comments, there's a good chance it's going to be deferred. You know, I think the comments we were just talking about on this site plan, like you said, they were minor enough. There may have been several of them, but we felt they were minor enough that it didn't require a deferral. But, you know, the word, you know, so to speak, the word is out that, you know, if these plans aren't in good condition coming to you, that they're going to be taking it back to work on it some more.
Very good. Thank you. Item 6C4, 20-3011, Buddhist Temple, construction of 3,500 square foot building for a community assembly use on 7.9 acres zoned RM located along Old Nashville Highway. Wat Buddhaham is the applicant. Doug?
Yes, sir. Thank you. The applicant, as you stated, is proposing to make an addition to the existing Buddhist temple property. We did have several comments on this site plan after reviewing it. Most of those comments have been addressed. There were a couple of tweaks that they need to do to the existing conditions, showing the flood zone, and also showing any impacts to their septic disposal area. We recommend that TDEC inspect those systems, make sure that they're still operational, which hopefully they should be. On the site plan, there was some question about a finished floor elevation. Regarding that, I'll let Mike speak more to that particular situation, but beyond that, our comments have been addressed. There were several things, and I'll let Mike discuss that.
Right. It's a lot of it. This area in the back is in a FEMA flood zone, and non-livable space. The finished floor is 1 foot above, but they do have a little box down at the bottom with a minimum pad, minimum floor is the same, but it doesn't reflect what's shown on the proposed building site. Let's see what else. I think that was the main thing. Let's just coordinate that. Oh, and the field lines, some of them might have been impacted by prior construction. We'll need to get them coordinated with the septic system, TDEC, groundwater protection, septic permit office, and then also building codes wanted to research some of the buildings that in the past were constructed on this property. And one of my pictometry maps is kind of acting peculiar. Let's see if it'll work. Okay. So where they're proposing to build is in this area here. And it is in a FEMA flood zone a little bit, but it's going to be open on all sides. I think it's more like like these other structures where they're open on the sides. So it's not going to be as big of an impact if the water's allowed to flow through freely. These are like open pavilions, whatever, here, and they're proposing to build right back in this area. So we just need them to coordinate the previous construction on site and make sure the septic systems aren't impacted by that previous construction.
Pretty much this is just further expansion of
Yes.
church.
Even though they are open air, I don't think,
They still have to meet FEMA standards for elevation
yeah, I
and
don't
whatnot.
think we should allow water to flow through it.
Well, yes, sir. I'm going to make sure they build up to our FEMA standards, that they are what they need to be, and to ensure that they're not livable space. It's just because non-livable space has a lower standard, just 1 foot above the base flood elevation for FEMA. Livable space is 3 feet above, so it's a little stricter if someone were to live here, but since it's not a living surface, they can do to the lower standard.
So if they build it up, Mike, and build a pavilion type of building, open space, and at some point in time they want to enclose that, they would not be allowed to do that.
No, if it's going to be used for living space, if it's just for storage or non-living religious function, they could still do that, but if it's built up to the standard we require. So.
But under what they're proposing and what you're suggesting, they would never be able to enclose that.
No, they would. We're making them build to that. They just couldn't live in it. They couldn't house people in there. So they could continue to use it as a church function, a non-living space.
So they're building it up.
They are building it up. We are requiring that they're building up, and
okay, thank
we
you.
just want their plans to reflect. See, the floor is at 542, but they have a little box down here is minimum finished floor 541 and the pad at 541. That should be adjusted to reflect what's on up here. So there's a little inconsistency.
So,
There's just
okay, let me make sure I'm clear. They would what if they prefer to have the pad at ground level so they don't have to add steps and handicap ramps to do this?
they would just have to adjust the site with that. We can't wave our magic wand and say you don't have to do the FEMA.
But if it's not a livable space and it's just a meeting space, why do we care if it floods?
Well, we still want the building protected, and we don't want the building impacted by the base flood elevation for, they used to call the 100-year storm event. It's now a 1% chance. So there's still a statistical chance. You know, floodwaters have hydrostatic pressure that push on the building. We don't want the building.
Mike, I get that. I get that. But there's no hydrostatic pressure to push against because there's no walls.
Right. But.
And this is not a livable space. So
Right.
why do we care?
I mean, we could have them lower it down, but still.
But you see what I'm saying? If it's not a livable space, if it's just a meeting area, it's nothing. This is no different than the pavilion at Barfield Park.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
Why do we care? Whether it's
all right.
Why would we want to make them put a handicap ramp and stairs for these people to climb to have to get it to an elevation for a flood level that we don't care if it floods?
Well, some of these buildings were converted to other uses without the building codes being aware of it.
And I understand that's a problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure on the front end this is what it needs to be. But I mean, I can work with them either way.
I guess the understanding needs to be, look, Scouts Honor, you're never gonna make these a livable space, and then you can do this. If you have intentions in the future to make these a storage building or a livable space, you've got to raise the floor elevation.
Right. So FEMA requires anything, even a deck, the lowest building elevation has to be at a certain elevation. So that's what we're encouraging them to do. It's not an undue burden. See, it's sitting on existing 540 elevation, so they're just bringing it up a couple feet. You know, and you count the floor system with the finished floor, so the concrete slab, the gravel that it rests on would count in that fill material. So we can work with them, but
I see Commissioner Sereno in the audience, and if you'd stand up just for a second, I'm going to ask a question. Do you or your congregation have any problems with building that up to FEMA standards? Is that your commitment to do that? No problem? Okay, thank you.
Mike, I've got a question.
Yes,
If
sir.
we build that up 2 feet, is there a pond associated with this to take the deflected water that will not be in that space? Because it's got to go somewhere.
right, I don't believe that would kick it into much of a requirement. There is a area in the back that they could offset the drainage. Let me get back to that plan. So it is how many square feet? The building's 3,500. 3,500. So essentially they're proposing, let me zoom into this area. $3,500 square feet and adjusting some gravel drives around there. So, and there is a drainage area around there. So we didn't think that was enough to require a full pond for 3,500 square feet. So we allowed them to just move ahead with this. So we've seen a lot of houses, but they do have areas in the back that they could adjust that. But this is a drainage easement through here, part of the Charter Railway. So we didn't want to impede the drainage from this area to the north top of the page. Let me see if I can get that right. Okay. From, I guess, from the, that would be the southeast flowing through here. But no, just to answer your question, Mr. Whitworth, no, we didn't see that necessary for that little of area.
Staff recommends approval.
Yes, sir.
To approve with all of staff comments. We have a motion and a second to approve item 20-3011 for the Buddhist temple. Other questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye. Is there any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Item 6C5, 20-3012, Tennessee Bounce Parties, construction of 12,000 square feet commercial building, party rental equipment with related parking on 5+ acres, zoned CG, located along Old Nashville Highway. Active Investments is the applicant. Doug?
Yes, sir. Thank you. The applicant is proposing to construct a facility that rents party equipment, as you stated, such as inflatables, tables, chairs, etc. The property, you'll recall, was actually rezoned last year, and this is in the same general area for a couple of the other site plans that we've already considered today. There were several comments that were identified after our initial review. Most of those comments have been addressed. I did have some concerns with some of the buffering that's being showed, the landscape plan. There still needs to be a little work done on that. But again, those are things that shouldn't hold up any kind of an approval, but those are things that we'll continue to work through. They do need to identify a type 2 buffer between residentially zoned property and properties that are zoned commercial. As you go a little further back on the property, it's actually adjacent to land that's heavy industrially zoned, so the buffer doesn't have to go that far back. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike if he's got any other comments from the drainage plan standpoint. But from our standpoint, most of our comments have been addressed.
Okay, this one does still need a little more attention. If I can zoom in. So they're proposing, I think, a 12,000 square foot building here. They're elevating it and adding parking and drive aisles and storage area in the back. What I'm kind of concerned with, the building, they're raising it up, but water kind of flows from the southeast to the northwest through here. So I'm worried about water getting trapped here. They are showing a little bit of improvements, but I don't know if it's enough to get the water out of there. Might have to extend the ditch back a little bit here. And then it drains, let me get to my maps. It drains to an on-site area that we were hoping was going to be used for a regional detention area, but we're not seeing any improvements on that proposed location. They're going to utilize an existing sinkhole and to modify it, but let's see if I can get my contours to turn on. In this area, the proposed site is here, and like Douglas said, there are other tracks that will be developed in this area, and we thought that'd be a good idea to have a regional detention instead of each separate lot have their own detention. We were wanting them to maybe have a regional pond here, but for some reason my contours are not coming up. Let me try a different one. There we go. Here's the sinkhole location. We were assuming that they were going to modify that, but we have they're not showing any improvements to that area. So I don't know if we've addressed everything on that. So if we're adding additional parking, roof, all that substantial area, we're going to need to see some improvements. You know, this pond takes water, sinkhole takes water right now. We're adding all this additional impervious area. How is that going to impact the surrounding property, downstream people, if it builds up and spills over? So this one, I think, still needs a little more cooking because I haven't seen improvements to that pond. Maybe Manley can help me and tell me what's going on with that.
Morning, Commission members. Manley Thweet with Huddleston Steel Engineering. The sinkhole he's referring to is actually going to be, we're not going to modify it. We've done drainage calculations for that sinkhole, and based on its present condition, it is able to sustain or be able to treat the water really not only from this tract, but also there's plans to have this property in I think 5 separate tracts. And our drainage calculations show that this sinkhole in its present condition would be able to treat 3 of those tracts. And then the other 2 would not be able to go to that present sinkhole. We have already begun paperwork process for TDEC to get a underground injection control permit, basically to allow us to be able to drain to that sinkhole. So the plans right now are not to improve the sinkhole at all, but just to have the stormwater go to it as it is, as well as have the next 2 tracks to the northwest to be able to drain to it. If you know, Commission requires some modifications to it, that's something we'll have to take into consideration, I guess. But under its present conditions, our calculations do show it's okay.
So are you assuming that the sinkhole is going to take on water, or just it has the volume?
It already has the volume right now.
Mike made reference to improving a sinkhole. How do you improve?
You can obviously expand it, the area, make it larger to hold the water. So, and then also you can improve the throat of the sinkhole. So all these sinkholes are interconnected, but they do drain out eventually. So you can dig down to the open throat and put a standpipe in with perforations and rock around it. So
that would slow it down.
Well, it would help drain the sinkhole. Have an open throat. A lot of times these get sediment build up on them, and they have to infiltrate through a soil layer. So if you provide an open conduit to it's what's called the throat of the sinkhole, it allows it to drain out. But also, I would have to look at the calculations. What we would typically like to do is, so we look at the water surface area, assuming the sinkhole's plugged, it's not going to take on any water. We look at, you know, how high does the water get for various rain events, and then we look at, okay, if we develop this property and then several tracts around it, how high does the water get? You know, without any improvements, I'd have to look at those calculations again. Typically, you don't want to increase the water surface elevation. You assume the pond's plugged, you can't take on any water, but if you're adding all this parking lot and rooftops, that water's not soaking in this field like it used to. It's running off and going somewhere else, and it's going to that pond. So that's, I'm thinking I don't know.
The point is, even with the added infrastructure and the impervious area, it's still going to be able to hold it. That's what the calculations are showing now. We can certainly work with engineering staff
Okay.
on that. You bet we can.
Oh, and Manley's good about that. He is very good about adjusting that. So,
And if staff is just needing to some more area with it, I don't think modifying is out of the question. It just hasn't been our thought process here at the beginning.
In a severe rain event, how do we know this sink does not, in a severe rain event, bring water up?
well, that's what sinkholes do. So we always look.
Some do,
Right,
not all.
right. So we always look for. Let me show you if I can find it on my. A lot of times you can see if my map will work.
And we're assuming that there is no opening to it, that there is no drain to it. I mean, there may be, but that's what we're assuming not, like it's be able to hold it.
Right. So I'm good with working with Manley. He's a local. He plans on being here a long time and is very helpful with other things. So I'll certainly look at those again, but typically you don't want to increase the water surface elevation. So if we have multiple storm events and it builds up and spills over, I don't want the downstream neighbors to have, the argument that you've increased.
Which may be get to the modification part.
Yes,
If there needs to
yes.
be some modifications made to it, I don't think that's out of the question to do it.
So, and we thought it was a good location, for this because we'll see other site plans on this property as well because it's zoned commercial. And we thought if we could have one regional detention pond that each property developer owner will be responsible for paying for maintenance of this instead of 4 different little ponds. So,
This would serve 3 tracts.
or 3 tracks,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Mike, is it a concern if we're going to, essentially with the rooftops and impervious surfaces, be increasing the rate at which the water runs into a sinkhole? Don't we have to be concerned that somewhere else that sinkhole is connected to, that suddenly there is a rise upon their property? I mean, this is the great unknown to me. It's easier to chart out how water is going to flow on the surface when you can see it, but we're dealing with a cave system that we don't know for sure how it's going to react. And maybe one property is not going to affect it, but when you throw in lots of other properties around the area that may start to do the same thing, or suddenly we're going to start flooding areas that have not previously been flooded before.
Well, that's what I was looking for pond modification. So if you study a pond, assume it's plugged. I know sinkholes take water, but they also pump it out. But if we've got an extra volume, a bigger bathtub to hold various storm events, we've got an area to say we've held back our storm. Water's all connected either through the groundwater or surface water. So eventually it's all going to make its way to where it wants to go. So if we have an over excavation area where we're not impacting the surface water for these various events, that's typically what I see with pond sinkhole modifications, I should say. So,
Yeah, if
like I said, I'm good with working with Manley. I won't let him put a blade in the ground until we address all our comments.
If the commission needs it to be modified, I think that's something we can work with the staff on, commission on.
Like there's a lot of information that Mike still needs to feel comfortable with this plan. Would a deferral be the correct approach?
We would still need to work with staff. That's the main thing. We would still work with staff even if approval is granted.
Right. He still has to have a pre-construction meeting. So either he comes back in a month or you know, he gets everything addressed in the meantime. So Manley's good with working with us. So I'm okay with approving it subject to staff comments. And it can be done. I mean, I just need to see a little bit more work on that pond and make sure we've got an extra volume storage area, because that is you've heard me say this before, a volume sensitive area. We've got to be able to hold that volume of water until it can infiltrate into the ground.
We'll work with engineering on that, Commissioner.
Mike, I just want to add one thing. I want to echo Jim and Charlotte's comments in that I don't know that we got a straight answer, because what we've always been told is the very unpredictable behavior of sinkholes. And I don't feel like we have an answer to that question right now about how this particular sinkhole is going to behave.
Right.
So, and I feel like the drainage is our number one responsibility.
Yep.
So I don't know that I'm comfortable letting this work itself out, because the other thing you had recommended in your initial comments was a regional strategy for drainage for all 5 tracks.
Yes.
And this is only a strategy for 2 of those tracks. So 3 of those tracks. So we still have 2 that are unknown. So I guess my comfort level is not high, because I feel like there's still a lot of unknown about how this parcel is going to behave once it's developed.
Right. So that's a simple, if I was back as a design engineer, I would assume the 3 tracks that are draining to this detention pond or sinkhole would be built out at 80%. Worst case scenario, 80% solid impervious rooftops, parking lot, driveways, whatnot, storage areas. And I would look at, like I said before, the water surface elevation of the pond before everything is developed, and then after all 3 of these, you know, how is that going to change that surface elevation? Manley's saying he's got enough volume already that it's going to increase, but it's not going to build up and spill over. So he's got to persuade me on that, and that's what we need to work through. But like you said, drainage is a major concern, and that's what I wake up in cold sweats about every night. No, I'm just joking. Only when it's raining, so. So I'd be happy to work with Manley, or if y'all want to defer it, I'm good with that too.
If we defer it, he has to work with you to work out all the kinks.
Either way.
And if we approve it, subject to you working out all the kinks.
Yes.
I don't see the difference. I'll make a motion to approve it, subject to all that.
Okay. Like I said,
motion.
before they can start, we have to have a pre-construction meeting. So y'all have to approve it, and then we can move ahead with a pre-construction meeting, and that pre-construction meeting doesn't get scheduled until everything's addressed.
This pre-construction meeting doesn't even get scheduled until engineering is satisfied.
And
Mike, I think you're creating more work for yourself, but I trust you in what you do.
yes, and well, I've got some good staff help that keeps me straight, and Manley's knows I go through a box of red pens about every week. But he's good with helping us and working with us.
Thank you, Commissioner.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 20-3012 for Tennessee Bounce Parties. And the motion is to approve with all of staff comments, and that's the staff's recommendation to approve,
Yes.
subject to working
Right.
through all of these issues. Other comments?
Sorry to delay this. Question. Is that sinkhole, Michael, on this property, or is it behind the property?
It is just offside a little bit. The property that's being developed right now is a long, skinny 5-acre tract right in here.
Adjacent to
It's adjacent to it.
Okay. So let me go back to the basic question. Does TDEC not mandate you now to say that you must hold the first 1 inch of rainfall?
Yes.
So why
But
don't
we can do it in a regional facility.
Yeah, but you don't have a regional facility. You'd like to have one, and it would be that sinkhole, right?
Yes, sir. Right.
But if this sinkhole wasn't there, they have to.
He would have to do something on site.
Right. And this sinkhole is not on his site.
Right.
So why don't we just make him put a detention pond in and hold what he's supposed to hold?
Well, if I can go back to the plans, this relies on conventional septic system soil. So he is developing in between his two soil sites. There's one in the front, a large one in the front, and a smaller one in the back. So, and the way it is draining now, I mean, he could essentially lose one of his septic system soil sites to obtain a pond in this area, but, you know, it limits what he can do with the rest of the property. So we just saw, you know, this as a opportunity, you know, this site and the other sites to pay a maintenance agreement to have this pond maintained, investigated.
But I guess maybe it's because I've been cooped up for a while and I'm getting cabin fever. But Jim has talked about, Rhonda has talked about, we all understand that sinkholes are unpredictable.
Yes.
Water can go in, water can come out.
Yes.
So it's a scary thing. As an engineer, you don't know how much water you can let drain in there. And if I had a house next to one, I'd be a little leery about how much would pump out.
Right.
Right? So you're talking about a regional system. You're talking about this track and 4 others maybe dumping into there. And I'm thinking here, okay, we don't know. 5 times we don't know on 5 lots. So I'm thinking, okay, the state says you got to hold 1 inch, period, before you let it leave your property. So I'm saying, why don't we just make them hold the 1 inch? And you're saying, well, there's some soil issues, and and I'm saying, well, if you can't build, you can't build.
Sure. Well, you hold the 1 inch, or you do the 80% TSS removal, total suspended solids. So they either option, but yes, they could do that, but without knowing the ins and outs of the pond, that's why I was saying I typically look at the additional volume that's excavated in this pond or sinkhole. So you look at the water surface before, regardless if the water's pumping out or pumping in, and then how much additional volume are you requiring of this sinkhole to hold your runoff? You know, you're changing the ground cover from pasture land, farmland to parking lot building. So that water's running off going to the sinkhole faster than it had before. So we've got to look at that extra storage space, regardless if the water's going in or pumping out. If we've got that additional storage space, we've addressed our concerns, in my opinion.
I know, but I guess
You're still going back to water quality?
I'm going back to, okay, so if we allow him to dump, and we allow You're talking about 5 lots.
3. 3 is what Manley's saying.
Okay. So what happens when the 4th and 5th guy comes to us in 6 months, 12 months, and says, okay, we're going to use this sinkhole. And now we don't know, they come and say, yeah, we got plenty of volume. Or no, there's no volume left. So now they're going to have to put a detention system on their property because Manley's used
Right.
2/3 of it up.
Here's Manley. He can address that.
You see, what I'm saying is we just don't know. We just don't know. And maybe the answer is, Mike says, okay, dadgummit, we're not going to do anything until we establish a regional detention system that's going to hold this many cubic feet. And we're not going to do anything until we establish that much cubic feet, and then you're done. And after that, you're going to have to hold the excess, and property 3 and 4 are going to have to hold the excess, and we're done with it.
One part of this too is if we did individual ponds, each one of those ponds, when releasing water, would most likely go to this point.
Same point.
I had rather invest in improving that to take on all those properties, because the individual ponds, yes, they'll catch the first 1 inch, but they're still, when they're detention, so they're only going to detain and then release, so they're all going to end up
Still going in that same spot, right?
And you got to remember back in April of last year, when we brought this into commercial, I believe that's when that was done, wasn't it? We chased this rabbit back last year.
Yeah, I believe we did.
On all those properties, we chased that rabbit and talked about that sinkhole.
So I don't see any sort of easement or notation on a plat. What's to prevent the person that buys that sinkhole property from closing it up? And then we've got nothing. I just don't feel like that this is ready. All the bugs have been worked out. And you know, I see landscaping issues. I'm repeatedly seeing things come before us that haven't had the kinks worked out. And it seems to be a pattern here of things that aren't researched thoroughly. I'm starting to get the feeling that things are thrown out to us and say, let's see what sticks and what doesn't stick, and then we'll take it back again. And that sounds harsh, but I think that we've all got better things to do than sit here for 30, 45 minutes and talk about engineering details. I would hope that these and landscaping and other issues would be worked out long before they get to us. Some of this stuff is elementary. And we don't need to be reminding people of these things. So anyway, I don't see anything protecting that sinkhole, giving this landowner rights to that sinkhole.
There would be a consent to drain necessary by the neighbor.
I have a question on that drainage. Mike, you talked about a maintenance agreement. When you've got multiple commercial parcels, you know, if this was residential, they'd have a homeowners association. Mm-hmm. So how is a maintenance agreement maintained, enforced, managed under this scenario?
The same thing, it would be called a property owners association. So each property owner would be responsible for part maintenance of this pond. So if you had like a driveway in an easement serving several lots, each property owner would pay for the maintenance of that driveway. Same thing with the pond. So they would pay an annual fee for maintenance and upkeep of this area, and a 5-year investigation into the pond and various things like that.
What if they don't?
What if they don't? We have a public works department that has to step up and address the problems.
I do think some of that needs to be worked out, because we're talking about individual ponds and we're talking about a regional drainage area. I think that needs to be established. I think we need to plan what the course moving forward is. I don't think we have a clear idea on that yet. And we need to get the studies back and figure that out, which is the best course to move forward. So do you want that to be I'm on the side of recommending a deferral is where I'm at.
Let me see if I can summarize what the commission is feeling, or at least some of us, that we would prefer to see the regional in place for all of those properties instead of just several of those properties, such as the original suggestion that Mike had. And I think that's what I'm hearing, is that we would rather see the overall plan versus a piecemeal plan. Is that kind of correct? So if I think we've got a motion and a second to approve that we need to address, and then if it's approved, we'll go. If not, we'll entertain some other motions. But from what I'm hearing right now, we've got some concerns that this whole area was zoned at one time, if I'm not mistaken, and now we're piecemealing it and having each individual lot responsible for certain things, and then some people or some lots being able to drain and other lots not. And I'm a little nervous or concerned about that. I have no doubt that staff could work with that. But I think what I'm hearing is that this commission, Mike, would rather see all of those lots on the regional plan instead of just 3 of them. Did I kind of summarize that the way that most of us are feeling, or the majority of us are feeling?
Some time ago with the discussion, I was more comfortable than I think the recent conversation with the individual versus the regional, and I think I was the second on that motion to approve, so I don't know how that, to withdraw that second, so I need to withdraw that based on the latest.
Motion, the second withdrawn. So we have a motion to approve, and now we need a second.
I will withdraw that. Seems like the flavor has changed here rapidly. I don't, no, Mike's still got the same thing he's going to have to do whether we make the motion to or we defer it, so I'll withdraw that.
The motion has been withdrawn. We have a motion and a second to defer, and the reason we're deferring is because we want to see a regional plan. Is that pretty much correct? Okay. Have a motion and a second to defer item 20-3012 for Tennessee bounce parties. Other questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to defer, please say aye. Opposition? The motion to defer is unanimous. Item 6C6, 20-3013, Gum Road Mini Storage Parking Addition. Construction of parking addition to mini storage, including the construction of an 8,200 square foot carport upon 1.4 acres zoned CG located along Manchester Pike and East Gum Road. Curtis Williamson is the applicant. Doug?
Yes, sir. Thank you. This is the final site plan we have for consideration tonight. The applicant is proposing to construct a parking area for an existing mini storage facility, which is located across Gum Road and just slightly to the east from the subject property. As you recall, this property was rezoned back in October of last year. There was a lot of discussion at that time regarding the buffering of the property, especially along Manchester Pike and East Gum Road. This use that the applicant's proposing for this would also require a special exception from the Board of Zoning Appeals, which they did receive in January of this year. And the buffering, type 2 buffer along the frontages was a requirement that was placed by the BZA consistent with the Planning Commission's desires for that. After looking at the plan, there were several issues that needed to be addressed. There are still some issues, and I think Mike's got some too, but I'll go over the ones that we've got. First of all, of course, the subdivision plat will have to be submitted for us to review in order to create this lot. The GIS shows it being created. Again, this is one of these where we don't know exactly when that happened or how exactly that came about without us being involved in it, since it's under 5 acres. The applicant is aware of that, and there will be a final plat submitted for that. There also will have to be a photometric plan, a lighting plan submitted to staff. We don't always get those on the front end, which is not a deal killer by any means. It's just something we look at prior to permitting being done. As far as the landscape buffering is concerned, well, before I get to that, looking at the they're showing, as you can see, kind of in the middle of the parking area, some of the grassed area. At first, that was just going to be just open area, if you will, just kind of like a paved area. We made the suggestion, you know, if you're not going to use it for anything, why don't you just grass it up? There's really no reason for it to be paved. It doesn't look like they're proposing or showing, at least any that I could tell, any necessarily any curb or maybe parking stops or something like that. So we've asked them to possibly consider that. That way, if someone's not backing out onto the, or, backing their vehicle or the boat, RV, whatever it is, onto the grass and destroying the grass. But as far as the buffering is concerned, you can see they have a pretty substantial buffering plan along East Gum Road and Manchester Highway. The way that it's worded in the comments toward the top of the page, they're not necessarily referring to it as a type 2 buffer. We'll need to verify that all the plantings are there, which you would normally have, and the distances are there. Conversations with the CUD prior to the meeting also indicate that they'll need to work pretty close with CUD as far as how some of these plantings are going to work, because that's right within their easements along Manchester Highway. So there still needs to be some work done in that regard. I believe site circulation is also a concern that we had, but with that, I'll turn it over to Mike to let him discuss the engineering issues that remain on this.
All right. So we've been going back and forth. Manly's another project with Manly. We do have an on-site detention pond, and we're going from pasture land to heavily impervious area. So that's the need for the pond. One of the things that we've been working with Manly is, no fault of his own, is a existing structure, and I'll show you at the corner of Manchester Pike and Gum Road. The property is proposed in this area right here, but this is part of our heartburn right here, this structure that's grandfathered in. Been there probably since the Civil War, before, maybe not that long, but so we were working with Manly to relocate the driveway farther to the east, and he has done that. And what we're concerned about is you've got RV, boat, and trailer parking coming in and out. The existing site is here. They're proposing the many storage places here with the buildings, and you can see they do have some RV parking here. They're wanting to add a covered parking in this area and more parking spots around here. So our thought is get the driveway far to the east as possible. Somebody coming around this corner and a large vehicle, RV, pulling out might have some conflict. So they've moved it as far to the east as they feel they can, and what we've had them do is address the wide turning radii on these driveway here to allow a larger vehicle a smoother transition out into Gum Road. So, but in working with the additional runoff imperviousness of the area and creating a pond here, it has generated some unusual turning movements, I should say, for large recreational vehicles. Earlier, we did have the ability to run straight through here, but the pond has grown through our comment and review cycle. So we're wanting them to add a large truck turning template to show a RV being able to maneuver through here and get into this parking. This is a covered parking area here. They do have a wide, let me see if I can find a wide area. They have 30 feet in places, 33 in others. And I don't drive an RV, but even somebody with years of experience, I think that would be a hard maneuver. So what I'm getting at is I think they need to look at this a little bit more. I don't feel comfortable with an RV swinging around. I'd hate to rent this last spot and you know, have a hard time getting in and out. So I apologize. I think this one needs to cook a little bit more too.
Mike, I have two questions. With Manchester being a state road, would they need to get permission to come in off of that, right?
No, their driveway's on Gum.
But I'm saying, could they, if they wanted to have that access off of Manchester, is that a possibility?
Yes, that's a possibility. They could get a driveway over here, and that's, you know, a good spot would be way down here. Might be a better location, and that is an option, but they have to go through the state for that one.
And is that far enough away? I can't tell distance-wise. Would that be far enough away from East Gum that you're not, you know, putting too close together? I know we try to stay away from that sometimes.
Yeah, anywhere near there's an intersection, I try to get it at least 150 feet or more away from. They have that here, but that building still gives me some heartburn. You can see the outline of it, and it's still a part of the right-of-way into the county's right-of-way here. But yes, if they had another entrance up here, it might help the functionality of this.
Well, and then the other question I had is, and they'd probably lose some space if they did this, but based on the layout that we've got and where the pond is, would it make sense for those spaces to be diagonal?
The the covered carport?
Right. Because I'm just thinking you're not having to get quite as tight in there if you're going in diagonally as opposed to just straight in.
The problem that I see, if they're angling in, if it was like a wraparound, they could drive, you know, pull out and then drive away to one of the entrances. They could, where the exit is, but that currently, the way it's designed, stops. So they're angling in, and then they'd have to really swing it around to get going back the other way.
Yeah, I was just thinking unless you backed in.
Right. If it was circulation around the entire site, then yeah, that could work. But the way that it's currently drawn, yeah, I don't think that's that'd be a good option.
Right. This pond grew dramatically from the last review. We look at it 3 times, and the second time they get comments back first and second time. The third time they don't. So this is, you know, new on Manley here, but it's just the functionality of it, you know, being able to come in here and then come around. And if I'm renting this spot, you know, that's a 40-foot stall, so you can get a pretty large RV in there. I don't know if I could make that maneuver to back in or even pull in. If you did pull in, you'd have to back out the whole way. So.
But if your driveway was down there on the other end,
well,
probably
yeah.
even pull all the way through if it was only covered on top.
Still got that same issue here. If we had more pavement over here, they could pull forward and then back into that spot. But then we've got landscaping requirements on this edge.
Are those stalls 3-sided? I mean, or are they just 2-sided?
I think it's, a lot of times it's walled. It's just the outer walls. So
if you look on it, there's a closed end of the building. There's a little label right there.
This will have a closed end. This will be a solid wall and a solid wall here. This front part will be open to the south.
Okay, that's just part of what I was just thinking. If you didn't have the wall on the front or the back, and you only had the wall separating the stalls, you could, if it was positioned correctly, you could ideally pull all the way through.
Well, but they would have to be able to.
I'm saying if you had a driveway to the back,
yeah,
you could ideally pull all the way through. You could have one entrance, one exit, and change your flow there.
Right. Yeah.
Did you say that we had a 30 feet between the detention pond and the building?
Well, there's 30 feet right here. So if, and then 30.
You're going to ask me to pull a 24-foot tag-along trailer with a pickup truck and back it in that hole?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever driven a trailer?
Yes, sir. And that's what I'm saying. I think this still needs to cook some more.
I've got a little trailer driving experience, and you're not going to take a truck and trailer and back it in that first hole up there.
Right. See, I was born without the trailer back in Jean, so it's difficult for me, even with a small, garden trailer. That's what I'm saying. This needs some more review and processing.
Mr. Chairman, I've heard about enough. I move we defer.
Hold on. Mr. Chairman,
We've got a motion.
I raised my hand before. I raised my hand, he didn't. I have a solution, and it may help on your dadgum bubble jumping thing too. You said the volume increased. What is your volume of storage you need right now, Mike?
Well, when we reviewed, they submit the detention pond calculations as well. And I told them that I think they look at the curve number, what's
volume. Don't build the watch, just give me a volume.
I don't have the calculations in front of me, so I don't know.
Why don't, instead of an open pond, why don't we just put the storage underground in pipe chambers?
You could do that.
And pave the whole
pave over the
thing
top
and
of
your
it.
problem is solved.
Yes, sir. Right.
And it's about $10 a cubic foot of volume storage is what he's got to budget. Problem solved.
Right. And then you could still use that area. Yes.
Drive over it.
Park on top of it. Yes. Right, and then you pave over the top of it. It's underground detention. It's more expensive, but you still can function on top of it, and so that's what I'm saying. It still needs some time to cook. It's not ready. What's that? I'm sorry. Well, if you could pave that area, is what Commissioner Cush is saying. If you could pave over the top of this, you open that area to maneuvering room.
Now, I will say that you still, they still have to look at lot coverage and all that, which would count the paving. I think it all goes back to the same thing. It needs more time. Even if they decide to do that and want to do a redesign, we're not saying it's not an option. I think that's like Mike said. That definitely is an option. But if he just did that and then paved over everything, he'd probably be over his lot coverage that he's allowed in that district. So he'd have to accommodate for that as well.
We had a question before the motion was considered, so I need a motion.
I'll make a motion again.
Motion to defer and a second. Other questions or comments? And our motion to defer is subject to staff's approval of space requirements and those types of things, okay? Other comments or questions? Once again, we have a motion and a second to defer item 20-3013 Gum Road Mini Storage Parking Addition. All those in favor of that motion to defer, please say aye. Opposition? Motion to defer carries. Thank you. Staff?
We don't have any other reports or comments, sir. Thank you.
Good job. Our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, April the 13th. That will be here in the second floor of the historic courthouse, 6 p.m. Any other questions or comments? Once again, thank you for your, I'm sorry, Commissioner.
I just have one other business item. I'm on my second tablet. My first tablet froze up. I was able to swap it out. My second one froze up. Charlotte's froze up. Okay, so we need just a phone number or somebody from IT so that when we're sitting here and it freezes, we can just shoot them a text and they can come down here and bail us out, because they always do it really quickly once they know, but there's no way for them to know that we're frozen out of these tablets.
Right, yes, thank you. And if, in the future, if that does happen, just kind of flag me down, because we can definitely say something. I apologize, I didn't realize that it happened. Yeah,
And we can have help
just
buttons,
wave the,
help buttons, flags, whatever
or shine the
technology is.
OIT, signal on the ceiling or something.
Anything else? Once again, thank you for your attendance today. It's meaningful to the county that we operate as normally as we possibly can under these circumstances, and your attendance and participation is really appreciated. Thank you, and with that, we are adjourned.